5 years ago, no one was with a good habit with customers on how to deal with subscription, so things would renew naturally. Now, every purchasing office is looking critically at all their book of software and questioning every time. So you have to sell it every year. That's something that has changed a lot in the past 3-4 years.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Revenue Insights podcast. We're thrilled to have Hervé Timsit, the Chief Revenue Officer at EDB, with us. With over 17 years' experience in enterprise software, IT infrastructure, and SaaS sales, Hervé has a proven track record of scaling sales teams and driving business growth at high-value companies like Microsoft, CloudBees, and TraceLink. He has a unique ability to combine sales strategy, market development, and revenue operations to deliver exceptional results. Hervé's insights into driving digital transformation and aligning RevOps across global teams will be invaluable to our listeners. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Hervé.
Thank you for inviting me, Guy. Great to be here.
So we're going to jump straight in. You've got this fantastic, fascinating career working in a wide range of companies, all the way from startup through to public giants. Can you share what initially sparked your interest in the revenue operations and sales leadership space and how you got started?
Yeah, actually, it was not the plan at all for me to end up in tech, right? I come from a family of entrepreneurs which were in construction business, and that was not the plan. I was lucky to be born in Casablanca, which was a very, very diverse place. You know, my friends in the classroom were about everything from race, wealth, religion, thinking. And that was a blessing for me because it really helped me connect with many different people. But to cut a long story short, very quickly, I would say 84, 85, I realized that software and IT were going to change completely the world. And I remember I was already building a business application with local area networks in 85 and 86. Yeah, I remember, some people would remember that 1 megabyte twisted pair. But I could see the power of those things. I could see how it could transform the way people work together first and the way it transformed the efficiencies for companies, things such as cash collection or planning. And then very quickly, instead of doing a career in construction business, I say, I want to be part of the people who are going to change this world, because I knew I could see that all that technology was going to change this world. And truth is, it did.
Amazing. And talk us through the career path from there. So it sounds like you were quite technical at the time. So you ended up as a chief revenue officer. Take us through that journey.
So yeah, pretty naturally, when I made that decision that I wanted to be part of people making that change, and being in an entrepreneur family, I created my first company. And I built it from the ground up. I was the first employee. And we were specialized in back-end software, API software that would change the way that organizations communicate better. We were really focused on collaboration. We had a word at that time called groupware. And so I created my first company. And after 3 years, I was lucky to sell a good chunk of it and understand that, that was a really, really nice place to have fun, grow things, build things, make money on the way. And I did that a couple of times with other software companies. And after selling the third one, I was thinking about what's the idea I'm going to have for the fourth one. And, I didn't come up with anything really great or that excited me a lot. And then I got a headhunter call me and say, look, we need someone that knows how to deal with those large OEM deals, because we got pretty good at selling our technology as OEM to IBM and Lotus and all those guys. And we need someone who's going to build a business around that. And I was lucky to start working for BMC at the time. And it was funny for me because people say, Hervé, you've been a CEO. How come now you're going to work for other people? And I used to tell them, first, if you think that when you're CEO, you're the chief in command and you run everything, you don't, right? Number one. Number one, when everyone left the office, all the hardest problems are on your desk, and there's no one else to help you deal with them. But you're not the only boss. It's either your board or your wife or sometimes both of them. So I told them, actually, there's not big a difference working for an organization because you always work with people or for people in some way. And for me, it was a revelation because building a business, a software business, without any best practices, never worked for a blue chip company before. I learned so much. At BMC. I learned so much with the different teams I worked with, whether it's Tom Schodorf, who ended up building Splunk, whether it was with John McMahon and those guys. And they were amazing mentors for me, which really helped me skill my game and get the science behind instinct. I did it again at EMC. And for all those times with blue chip company, I became kind of the guy who goes and fixes the sales force which are underperforming quite naturally. And I started to like it. I started to be good at it. And then I was at EMC for 3 years. An old boss of me called me and said, Hervé, look, we have a great company, great products, great market, and a shit sales force. Do you want to come and help? And it was kind of the right timing for me. EMC was an amazing company, great culture. I love my time at EMC, but it's a big ship. And when you're an entrepreneur like me, sometimes you wonder, hold on a minute, whether I wake up in the morning or not, I'm not going to make such a big difference. I was running a $100 million business in EMC. That's nothing in the scale. And this is why I decided to have the third phase of my career, which is go back to high growth company, VC or PE funded. I did the same thing for a number of companies, build a sales team. And we can talk about that, how we do that, grow the sales team, and then eventually acquire another company, sell the company, and then move to the next one. Some worked really well, some worked really bad. Look, that's part of the game, right? I remember one time, built a great team, and then 4 months later, the shareholder says, sorry, we're going to sell the company. And we wasted a lot of time and a lot of talent. But that's part of the game. And then, what I used to do is to stay 2 or 3 years, do the job, build the team, and then get to evaluation event, move to the next one. And I ended up at EDB. And then, I'm not going to stay 3 years. I'm here to see it through. I've been here 3 years now. I started running EMEA as a VP for EMEA, being promoted last year as a CRO. And it's been an amazing ride, whether my early days as an entrepreneur and then as I would say blue chip sales leader, and then as back in high growth, has been an amazing journey for me, where I learned so much.
It sounds fascinating, and what an amazing experience and going through that at a unique time in history. So incredible to hear. So look, at EDB, give us an understanding of kind of how big the team is that you're responsible for.
So my team is around 250 people overall. So I run all the go-to-market teams. The company is about 800 people now. So it's a good part of the company, but it's everything that has to do with revenue generating activities and go-to-market activities.
And when you're managing a team of 250, how many direct reports have you got? How many people do you end up having to work with every day?
Ideally, you want to be below 8, right? But in times of transformation, sometimes it's really hard because as you're transforming the business and building, it's not always perfect. I had at some point to have 12 direct reports, which was really, really hard. So I'm back to 8 now, hopefully 7 soon. And I think that's a good size. But again, you have to not look for perfect, because as you build and transform, there's no perfect. And sometimes you have to stretch yourself.
Yeah, they say great is the enemy of good. So I buy into that absolutely. As a CEO of a scale up, that's all we can hope for. So at EDB, you oversee a global sales team and are deeply involved in driving strategy. How do you focus on ensuring alignment between sales, marketing, and success? Because we're seeing a lot of energy at the moment. In fact, I've just been reviewing. Most of our listeners will know about our 2024 benchmark report. We're just working on the 2025 benchmark report, and we saw a step change in the role of the seller. While maybe over the last year or two, historically, the seller was a single purpose vehicle, and there was someone else responsible for top of funnel. There was other people responsible for cross-sell and upsell. We've seen a massive shift this year with the seller being almost 360, and over half of the businesses that we talk to are either have their sellers as 360 or intend them to be. It kind of reminds me of the old days, because that's how we used to do things, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you've got the buyer had to get confidence and trust in the seller if they were to sign the contract in the first place. So holding on to that relationship, I think, is really, really powerful. But are you seeing the teams aligned, and how are you finding to bring everyone together?
So there's a couple of things that have not changed so much, and a couple of things that have changed a lot, right? When we started to sell software many years ago, the thing was you would show up in front of the customer and you would drop the toolbox in front of him and say, that's the price of the toolbox, and you, Mr. Customer, is going to have to figure out how you use it. And we evolved, and we talked a lot about those years about value selling and solution selling and all those things. The truth is, we're still way behind. The vast majority of sellers in this world are still selling tools and features and function. And so that's one, and I'll get back to that. The other piece which has changed is the dynamics, right? We used to sell perpetual software and hardware, and we're selling most of it is subscription now. And not only we've changed the way we sell, but also the customers have changed the way they buy, but also the way they renew. Right. 5 years ago, no one was, I would say, with a good habit with customers on how to deal with subscription. So things would renew naturally. Now, every purchasing office is looking critically at all their book of software and questioning every time. So you have to sell it every year. That's something that has changed a lot in the past 3-4 years, which obviously creates a lot of pressure on your churn. So we have to consider all those movements, and that goes back to what you're saying about make sure you address all those stakeholders in the account. So one way I've used in many ways to align all those things is really change the culture from silos and aligning behind one thing, which for me is value setting. Really understanding and defining for the whole organization what are the 3 or 4 things we're about. What are the 3 or 4 things where we make a difference for our customers? They can be around innovation, they can be around growth, they can be around cost cutting, they can be around leadership in market. But you, as a company, I think you have to define those, and those have to be shared with all the organization, not just the go-to-market organization, the engineering organization that starts to understand when they're building a feature, what is this feature meant to impact for our customers, and look forward to that when you talk with CSM, when they make sure that there's adoption, what is the adoption intending to do for the customer, and really change the mindset of the whole organization, not just team organization, and align them behind those value drivers. Now, that's easy to say, but to do that, you need alignment at the executive level with all your other colleagues, because this only works if this is something which is really shared across all the organization, all the pillars in the organization: marketing, engineering, product management, revenue, and all those things. And that's one of the things I've been working on for 1 year, which is, I always say in our job, sometimes you have to fly the plane and while you change the engines, right? So you have to deliver the revenue while you change some of the engines. So we did that at the same time. We had an amazing year. But at the same time, we managed to transform the organization and align everyone. Now, the next thing is you have to make sure that it stays this way, right? And we don't drop the ball, because there's always going to be distractions.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Some of the data we're about to launch next month in the 2025 benchmark report, we were looking at the source of new revenue. And what's really interesting is in 2024, we saw that over 52% of growth revenue didn't come from new logos. It came from existing customers. And it shows how important looking after those existing customers is. And one of the really interesting data points we saw, Ebsta as a revenue efficiency platform, we really try and focus in on understanding what relationships are driving revenue. So what was fascinating to look at was the impact of, if the last 2 QBRs you've done with your customer were with the C-suite, you are now 7 times more likely to get the cross-sell upsell. And if the last two QBRs were with more junior resources, you are now 4 times more likely to churn. And it's so important to understand that which relationships are driving revenue for each organization, and making sure that you've got a simple way of monitoring the engagement with those stakeholders. And it just shows you, data is so important now to how we operate, and you can't run a scalable engine, a scalable go-to-market engine without data. So from your perspective, Hervé, how do you incorporate data analytics and performance metrics into your RevOps strategy and kind of continue on that journey of optimizing sales processes and driving better outcomes?
People often make fun of me because of my dashboards and the way I look at the data. And I want to make sure I'm prescriptive when we industrialize the dashboards or the reporting. I don't wait for someone to tell me, is that good enough for you? And I'm going to say that again. I carry with me my SQL request that allows me to extract data from my system, whether they are Salesforce or whatever, so I can look at the data real time. And that's the first thing I do when I connect on my PC in the morning, is really look at whether it's pipeline, engagement, renewal, all the motions, activity, leads. I look at all those data all the time. And then they enlighten you when you have the conversation, because you can't just have the data piece. This is what I call the gut and the brain, right? So the brain is the data and the gut is the conversation you're going to have with the people in your team, and those have to connect. So I instrument those things, and then I ask my RevOps organization to industrialize that so we can deploy that in the rest of my organization and have the same measures. We have all sorts of data, as I said. You also have data, for example, how to manage performance and leading indicators in terms of activity, quality of activity, indicators of pipeline, source pipeline transformation, pipeline velocity, but also the odds of that pipeline coming by source. You're looking at the performance of each every one of your functions, whether it's demand generation, digital marketing, whether it's outbound prospecting from your SDR, and you connect all those data together. I would say I probably spend an hour and a half every day just looking at that data. Now, you have to make sure looking at the data doesn't change the data. So you have to make sure you protect your time and you spend time on the field. The best time for me is when I'm on the field with customers. That's a really good way also to connect those things, what you see from what the business is telling you and what the customers are telling you.
No, totally understand it and agree. And it's lovely to hear how data-driven you are. And it's so pivotal. If you want to be the biggest difference between your individual contributors, your sellers that have kind of been promoted into management roles, and professional managers, is how they digest the data, how they are able to interpret the data and actually action it to actually have change.
It's also, Guy, an amazing coaching vehicle, right? Because when you coach people and you help them develop and you help them grow, you can't rely on impressions or perception. You have to get it back to what matters and the difference and the impact they're making. So when you actually have reviews with the individuals, you want to make sure you sustain that with good level data to help them progress.
No, I absolutely agree. We went into a customer recently, and one of the things we do when we set up a customer is we want to make sure we're going to build benchmarks on that. Some customers might have 10, 20, 30 different go-to-market motions, and we need to build a benchmark of what good looks like for each of those motions so we can compare it to the deals that are in flight. The challenge is the data in Salesforce is never as clean as you want it to be. So we built, I suppose, an AI agent that's able to go through the historical traffic in things like the mailboxes, the calendars, and the phone systems, and we fix the historical data associated to deals that closed, won, and lost in the past. So you might see an opportunity with one contact and 3 emails on it. By the time we finished our journey, it might, after we kind of connected everything up, you'll see that the buying committee was actually 9 stakeholders and there were 250 interactions through a 5-stage sales cycle. So knowing that information allows us to kind of understand what the benchmarks need to be, and then we can prompt the B and C players as to what the A players would do in those circumstances and encourage them to follow that process.
And as we talked about churn, which is really, I think churn is, you can execute well on selling, whether you expand or get new logo, but churn is something that can bring you from great to average if you don't control it. Actually, the data is going to help you a lot, because one of the key I learned in churn, of course, there's product market fit, there's quality of product, there's all those things, but there's also at what time do you engage with the customer? Because If you engage with customers at the moment you need a renewal, it's over. It's too late. The decision has already been made 6 months ago. Now, no one has infinite resource, and you can't deal with the thousands of customers you have. But if you have data and you look at the data in the right way, just as you described, then you have hints of where should you focus first in order to ensure you're going to get either your renewal or better your expansion. It's critical.
I absolutely agree. And again, we developed or codified what a relationship is, and we turn it into a score out of 100. And being able to look at an individual account and say, look, guys, no one's engaged with the C-suite in the last 6 months. We need to do something about that. And being able to monitor that, and a week later go, well done. We managed to get engagement with the CFO or whatever it might be. It's a beautifully simple way of really keeping on top of this stuff and giving everyone a clear, single North Star metric they need to aim for.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta. Every year, we produce the B2B Sales Benchmarks Report. It provides insights from the analysis of billions of revenue dollars, revealing what attributes drive top sales performance and highlighting where time and money are wasted. To get early access to this year's Benchmarks Report, sign up for our newsletter at ebsta.com/newsletter. Now, back to Revenue Insights.
I had a different question for you. I think you and I have something else in common. I believe that we're both real advocates of the MEDDIC methodology. Huge fan of giving sellers that structure to really help them understand what good looks like. And what's really funny, one of the things I mentioned earlier that when we onboard customers, we go back over the last year's worth of data. One of the other sources we look at are call recordings. So if someone's already got a system in place that's recording their calls, we're able to analyze the last year's worth of calls. And what's fascinating when we then attach them back to the opportunities is you'll see deals that have closed lost in stage 4 or 5 in the sales cycle. But when we look back at the qualification, so our AI engine will extract MEDDIC from the call recordings and tell you how well or badly you qualified the customer, even on deals that closed a year ago. And what's really interesting is, more often than not, deals that close in later stages, when you look back at the qualification, it was just never there. They weren't actually in a sales process. We didn't have MEDDIC complete. That methodology is so important. However, coming to my question, how do you ensure that the entire sales team adopts and consistently applies MEDDIC to accelerate that sales cycle and increase deal value?
When you look at salespeople, it's really hard because you have to be optimistic and you have to be extremely paranoid at the same time. So that could be the definition of being crazy, but you have to do those things. So you have to believe in what you're doing, but at the same time, question all the time what you're doing. And I think MEDDIC is going to help you get that rational and that framework that also help you materialize really where you are and what are the gaps you have and where do you need to go first? What priority do you need to do? Do I need to develop a champion? Do I need to make sure I understood what pain I'm dealing with? Do I need to make sure that I meet the guy who's going to sign? All those things, MEDDIC tells you where you are and what you have to do next. Now, back to your question, MEDDIC has been, everyone talks about MEDDIC and sometimes people say MEDDIC is a methodology where we all know it's not. It's a qualification methodology, not a sales methodology. And a lot of people, by reading MEDDIC, think they get it, right? And because it's easy to understand. But there's a big difference between understanding MEDDIC and making it second nature in every engagement you have with your customers. Because this is where it makes a difference. Once you're back at the office, if you ask yourself, oh, is this guy a champion? It's too late. You've left the room. It's important when you are in the room and when you question around the table, who can be my champion? Who are the 1 or 2 guys that can be my champion? And how I'm going to do to make sure I develop those people. So I think the challenge with MEDDIC is not understanding it, but is making sure it gets inside a second nature of the rep. And that takes time. It takes time, but back to your point, it also takes alignment in the organization to make sure the SEs, the CSM, the renewal managers, the reps, everyone speaks with the same language. So the way I've approached that is instead of rolling MEDDIC, I've approached it by reading one by one, which is almost a letter for first quarter, a letter another quarter, starting with what I think is, we would dispute is champion or identify PM, the most important one. I think identifying the pain is probably the first one that has to go, because if there's no pain, there's no reason for you to spend time here and the customer to spend time with you. Make sure people really get that. Once you get that, you move to the second one, and that works.
I think that's really interesting. Last year, we did a big piece of analysis. I think we analyzed 1.2 million hours of sales calls. And what was amazing is that the top performers were working with the customer on their objections very, very early in the sales process, really not only trying to understand why they should buy what they're selling, but also trying to understand what are the other priorities that they're working on. What other projects could get in the way of this? And what ROI have you got on those projects versus this? Really, and the way that they tackle those objections, that investment in those early stages pays dividend. That the speed and pace at which deals progress, once you've got through that, is fascinating. And while the B and C players almost shy away from dealing with those objections until much, much later in the sales process, and then all of a sudden everything slows down.
Absolutely agree with you. I often say to my team, I say, if there's an RFP, probably someone has already written it and you're not going to win it, right? If there's a budget, probably somebody has already built the budget and it's not for you. So your job as a salesperson is to effectively design the demand, influence the demand, and create that budget, or take the budget from somewhere else. I have a funny story. I was working for a company at one time where we used to sell a lot to public sector in the UK. And one day we lost a deal against a garbage truck, because at the end of the day, if you look at the council, they had 10 things to buy, and they had made the priority, well, we have to buy the garbage truck before we buy that software. So we're always in competition with other projects, and effectively, at the end of the day, what's going to win is the level of urgency, but the champion you have, right? Do you have the stronger champions going to be able to drive your deal? That is, and if you don't build that in the beginning, to your point, you don't define those priorities, you don't identify who's the competition, you're going to end up losing a lot of time. Back to the question you were asking earlier on MEDDIC, one of the big impacts it does for you, it prevents you from working on the wrong things. So one thing we changed this year, we made, when I took over the role, we made validate a really, really important stage. Like everything that goes off in validate, which is stage 3 for us, has to be something we're going to win. So we put a lot of pressure early in the sales cycle, and it does two things for you. One, you stop wasting time and resource on deals you're never going to win. And two, you have more time to spend time on deals that you can win and make them bigger. So really, really back to your point of pushing qualification early, asking all the questions early is really critical.
Yeah, and we also found that finance persona is more important now than ever before. And in fact, if you don't engage with the finance persona until you're presenting back the solution, the win rates are 14% lower. So you really want that finance persona involved in that defining of the solution in the first place and agreeing what that looks like. And it's more important now than we've ever seen before. We've never seen how that role being so important. So really fascinating. And the other takeaway for me on MEDDIC, I kind of split the learning into two very different parts. I think there's one part of it which is all about understanding and explaining to the sellers as to why each part of MEDDIC is important and why you should ask the questions and how to ask the questions and dig deeper and so on. There's a very different skill set in recording that information in the system of record. And actually, what we see is a lot of sellers are actually using the methodologies, but they're not consistently recording it. And that was when we introduced our own call intelligence kind of feature set, where certainly not as broad as the likes of Gong, but it's very focused on extracting the MEDDIC from the call recordings, populating it into Salesforce fields, and giving them a score. Almost a green thumbs up or a red thumbs down. And the seller wants that green thumbs up because they want to move to the next stage, or they get a spiff if they get it right. So allowing the AI to do the heavy lifting, it still allows the seller to focus their energies on building the relationships and asking the right questions. But the AI is so powerful now, it can really give you absolute consistency in the way we record the objections that were raised or the competitors that were mentioned, or capture the MEDDIC and score it for us. So for us, that was transformational and allowed customers to focus on the educating piece rather than worrying about the admin element of kind of getting it consistently in the system of record.
I agree, Guy. That's a really, really good way to look at it. And it does something really, really important that we all see together. It removes the pink color glasses, right? Because you can talk with almost every sales guy when they come back from a customer facing meeting. It's always amazing. it feels like the deal's tomorrow, and maybe the customer is excited too, right? But the reality, it's not. And having that other pair of eyes that give you other view and forensics on what happened is really, really good coaching element for the rep, but also for the first time who's dealing with him. So those systems are really, really important going forward.
And it's amazing the reporting you can get out of it, because it's all being done in the same format. Suddenly at the end of the month, you push a button and here's how often competitors are mentioned. And look, there's a spike in a particular one. How have we got the battle cards we need? And. So it's been revolutionary from my side. But as we talk about technology, throughout your career, I'm sure you've worked with all sorts of cutting-edge technologies in various roles. So how do you evolve and implement new technology to scale and optimize revenue operations? And is there a particular kind of a set of tech that you take with you as you move into different roles, or has it evolved over time?
Well, a set of tech I take with me first, there's not many things but Salesforce in terms of CRM. Like it's becoming the SAP of software, for the good and the bad, right? And but so I don't think that's a choice. Then on top of that, you need to make sure you have a system that allows you to make sense of those data, capture activities. And we have a stack, and we evolve. For example, Gong was a big thing 2 years ago. I think now probably there's other things on the market, to your point, which are doing a better job and which are more granular. I take with me the logic of all my analyses that have been built for many years. But one thing I often do is make sure you do it with your own technology. So as you probably know, at EDB, we do data and AI. There's no AI without data, and we have a bunch of technology. So we've built our own data lake with our own AI behind the sales data, because we want to make sure that when we convince customer, we are consuming our own technology. So as I go, I keep innovating and finding ways to make good use of the technology that comes in the market. We've recently secured a really good tool that helped us with activity, for example, which was really painful in the back. We had to scan the calendars and it was never right. And so you have to look on the market. What are the things that helps you move forward? Yeah.
Are you able to share the name of this new tech you brought in?
So we just secured something called Nectar, which does a really good job for us in terms of tracking activity. And being able to have the real activity, which activity is always, look, I always say, if you don't have enough activity, you're certainly not going to have enough pipeline and certainly not make your number. If you have enough activity, you may have, it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary condition. So you have to watch that. Don't say, oh, he's very busy. That doesn't mean he's good busy. He's probably very busy. No, you have to look, is he good busy?
No, I agree. Look, even what we're seeing is over 2/3 of sellers missed quota last year. And that's, frankly, it's just not sustainable. So we've got to find ways of bringing everyone along that journey with us.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, Guy. Look, because the reality is that there's the level of expectation from your shareholder, from the board, doesn't have the same speed as the reality on the market. The reality is when you do enterprise selling, yeah, you can be lucky and get a deal in 3 months or 5 months or 6 months because you get at the right time of something that has been building for you. But the reality, it takes you 6 months to a year to build a deal. And for reps, when you get reps in new territory where they're going to have to build a pipeline, it's really, really hard to make sure that you align quota attainment with those reps. I think the quota attainment for me is more of an issue of course, having the right people, giving the right coaching, the right training, all of those basic things. But I think there's a disconnect between the expectations with the financial world and the reality of what is it to build a business. And that creates a lot of pressure on that problem you were talking about, which is effectively making quotas.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always pressure in that area. I think that the challenge is how do we deal with that pressure? And you know, on one side, you become more data driven. You bring in consistency. You get everyone doing things the same way, and ideally they're all following the playbooks that the top performers are achieving. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses go the other way, which is that, well, let's just get rid of the low performers and spend more money on marketing. And the problem with that is that you end up with a high volume of leads coming into the business, but they don't match ICP. So as a percentage of the leads coming in, ICP is now getting even smaller, and the top performers don't care because they can smell out the good opportunities. But the B and C players, they just get lost. And so we need to, it's our job as leaders to give them the structure, to give them the tools they need and the data and the insights to prompt them as they move forward so that they can replicate best practice. And ultimately, if you've got 20% of the reps hitting quota, there's no reason why the rest of the sellers can't get closer to that number, because you've proven you've got product market fit. And really what we need, us as leaders, our job is to make it easy and to follow best practice and make the quickest route from A to B to be the right route. Otherwise, they'll keep going the wrong way.
And back to this point, I always say, sometimes people feel, oh, we want more revenue. It's easy, just hire a bunch of reps, right? And we get more revenue. Well, that doesn't work that way. I say, of course, you need more feet on the street. That's one way to do it. You need to get your people more productive. That's another way to do it. You need to have better other products to sell. That's another way to do it. Ideally, all of the above. But there's one, what I call limit to the physics. It's not just reps. It's also first lines and second lines. And in our jobs, you probably know that the first line job is the most important and difficult job in this profession. So actually, when you want to have more feet in the street, which is one way of increasing, revenue, you want to make sure you find great first line. And first lines don't come, it's a very scarce resource. And if you make a mistake on the first line, then you have an impact which is 5 people. So I think the critical point when you do that is equip yourself with first line which are data driven, that's done it, that know how this works, that already have that in that baggage. And then you can move the needle on the capacity.
I absolutely agree. So looking ahead, how do you see the role of RevOps evolving? It's such a fast-pacing space right now, and in particular in the context of digital transformation and what we're now seeing with these AI-driven technologies.
Look, I have an amazing RevOps leader, an amazing team of RevOps. In 8 months, they've changed completely the way we work. I'll talk about what it does for us, but also the job of RevOps is to make sure it frees up time for the field to have more face time for customers. The last thing you want, when they instrument, you want to make sure you instrument in a seamless way that doesn't impact the time of the people, because otherwise but what it did for me, reinventing the way we capture that data, reinventing the way we correlate that data, across the different silos, adjusting the processes. I moved like everyone else from sales ops to RevOps, but the way we optimize revenue, whether it's with the price of our product, the price increase, our upsell strategies, our new logo strategy, I could not do that. It's like flying a plane, right? If you don't have those data for you, you don't know where you're going. And the world is changing really fast. Technology is coming up really fast. So you need to have that feedback loop that only RevOps can build for you and give you the ability to navigate correctly.
Yeah, I think my takeaway for RevOps is try not to go too junior. It is kind of where I landed. I think frankly, I think the VP RevOps has a place to sit alongside VP Sales, Marketing, and Success, and I think it's such a strategic role. What we service a lot of PE-backed businesses, and what we see a lot of the times is a RevOps function that's been banging the drum that we talk about, consistency and in the way that people operate and following best practice and so on. But the leaders aren't listening. And so you need a RevOps function. You either need a CRO that actually buys into it in principle, or you need a RevOps function that's got the gravitas. And I suppose the big step change that we help our customers with is when that RevOps function is there, but it isn't getting the traction it needs with its leadership, by turning the data into insights and making it kind of almost in a picture format. Suddenly it becomes undeniable. And then it was the leadership's idea in the first place that we should definitely make these changes, right? And that's when the rubber hits the road. RevOps can know all of this stuff, but actually communicating it to commercial leaders, why should they focus on making these changes? Why is it important that we bring in this consistency? Why do we need to qualify? Why do we need to be multi-threaded? Why do we need to engage certain personas? When you show it to them, when you can see that the win rates are higher when you do these things, suddenly the buy-in goes, and something that the penny drops and the buy-in comes.
Yeah, Guy. And it's also the culture you instillate. So back to your point, my VP of RevOps sits in my RVP meetings, is with us, is one of is full part of the team. But it's also the way you communicate and you hold your team accountable. I'm very data-driven, and I'm going to ask a data-driven question, right? And then my leaders are going to need the support of their the RevOps leader to make sure they're equipped with those data. So it kind of flows naturally, but it's also the culture you instillate amongst your people and make sure that they think the same way.
I totally agree. Hervé, it's been fantastic getting the insights from you today. Thank you so much for your support and time. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that?
Just drop me an email, hervé.timsit@enterprisedb.com. Happy to help. And thank you for having me here, Guy. It's been really, really nice to spend and discuss those things with you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to paths crossing again. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.